And a good day, everybody. Welcome into the It's Official podcast. I'm Jeremy Plonk with First Bet and Express Bet, joined as always by Jeff Siegel. It's our 5 weekly topics every Tuesday where we look back at the previous weekend. We go north of the border for a lot of our reviews, as it was Woodbine Mile last weekend in Canada. Jeff, did you get any expressions after watching the races? I mean, did anybody just kind of make you jump out of your seat?
There was a couple of performances that were spectacular. Actually, I was impressed with the shipper from overseas in the mile, and
Mhm.
2-year-old filly on the grass looked good.
Right.
Yeah, I think we got something to work with, and I think we've got a couple of legitimate Breeders' Cup candidates in their respective divisions.
We'll talk about some other Breeders' Cup horses around the country that ran last week, and they will appear in our 5 topics on the big board as we get started with our first of those. And we're going to talk about the Keeneland Sales. They run through this Saturday. More than 1,500 yearlings have been sold at Keeneland so far during their famed September sale. And Jeff, as an industry, should we care about the Keeneland Sales? This is sort of like the NFL Combine and Draft all kind of mixed in one, right? They march them out, they parade them in front of the buyers, and then everybody drafts their teams. But a lot of times you're not drafting the race, they're drafting to resell in today's game, right? A lot of pin hookers buying these yearlings to sell them back in the 2-year-old in training sales next year. So should we be really geeked up about the Keeneland Sales?
I'm not, but I used to be part of that part of the industry, whereas the sales, the stallions, the mares, and stuff like that, and it's changed a lot in the sense that a lot of, as you mentioned, are buyers now that are looking to find which horses they can turn back and make some money and make a quick profit. It's kind of a risky business. It's, however, primarily set up for people who want to bid on horses like this. In other words, a bunch of rich guys with a lot of rich disposable income that they have absolutely no idea what to do with. So they throw it at horses, and they really don't care whether or not, they care, obviously, but it's not like they're making an investment and their life is going to change one way or another, whether the investment turns out to be profitable. So I look at these horses, I look at these owners that are bidding on horses like we're seeing in the ring, and it's just money they have nothing else to do with, and so the prices are absurdly high. And I look at these and I say to myself, how many of these purchases are actually going to turn out? How much are they going to actually pay for themselves? And I can tell you that the percentages of those that actually work out to at least cover the nut, if nothing else, are very, very slim. And that's why I'm not terribly impressed with these big prices, because it's not reality, at least the reality that I know.
This is an Into Mischief colt out of Nona Mia. Of course, that makes him a half to outwork, a pretty nice horse, and Nona's boy. This one ends up bringing $3 million. And, when you talk about the success of high dollar horses on the great stages, like Fusaichi Pegasus at the time in 2000 was the first horse ever to bring $1 million or more and go on to win the Kentucky Derby. And to my knowledge, I think he's still the last. I don't think there's been another $1 million sales purchase go on to win the Kentucky Derby, especially as a yearling. Now, this one's going to drop the gavel at $3 million, one of the absolute star sales of the Keeneland September sale. This year, Jeff, the median price for a horse at the Keeneland sale right now is $150,000. When you take the average of all the horses, not the average sale, but the median price. And that's really a stronger indication of where the market's at. It's down about 6% from what it was last year. So when we talk about should we care about these, when the market's down about 6% on the sales end, that measures up pretty even with what we're seeing with the bettors as well, as national handles trending in about that same direction, 6, 8, 9% down from the previous year. We know inflation is high around the country. The cost of goods and services higher than it's been in decades. So that all plays in. And I would think that the health of the yearling and the sales market and the wagering markets, not coincidentally, fairly parallel. And so should we care about it as bettors? If it was drastically different than what we're seeing with the betting markets, then I would say more of a concern. But I think it's trending along the same way we all are. We're all feeling the pinch in our pocketbook right now, the price of gas, the price of goods, the cost to heat your homes and things like that. Even rich people feel the pinch here and there. And, down 6% on the median. It's not like the bottom has fallen out of the market at all, but horses are still selling. High dollar horses are still selling really well. And that's what the trend is, right? I mean, we're at a point now where there's that group with Matacat, SF Racing, Starlight. They're all teaming up, giving themselves nicknames and going out and buying all the big horses with all their wallets combined. Stone Street sometimes involved in those groups. Those folks are still buying horses at a ridiculous, rate, and they're going to get some big horses and they're going to send them to Baffert and they're going to have some success with them. The ones with Baffert that have not had success end up in Maryland with Brittany Russell. We saw one this past week, a win at Laurel in a Lowndes Company, a similar type runner like that. And we've seen Doppelganger and some others move, to other circuits to try to find where they fit. But the people buying at that $3 million level, they're not looking for everyday allowance horses. They're looking for stallions, right? And to be a stallion, they want to win something big and they want to win something really fast.
And not only that, they're combining their forces and buying not just one or two, but they're buying 15, 20. And I was talking to a trainer and I said, most of these horses I notice, they're not carrying their weight, really. And he said, yeah, but the people who buy these horses, they buy 15, 20, they group all together, and they're looking for one or two to pay for the lot. That's they don't know which one it's going to be,
right?
But that's how they operate. It's you can't put all your eggs in the one basket. Oh, I just bought a $1 million horse and he's going to be a stallion. Well, you better have 9 or 10 others in the barn as well, just in case, because you just never know. And the other problem that I see is, and this is more of a long range term, is that in order to quote unquote get out on these purchases, you have to find stallions. The problem that is that the market for broodmares has been shrinking for years now. Right. There isn't as many opportunities now for these second level stallion prospects who 10, 15 years ago would be slam dunks. Right now, there aren't enough mares to go around, especially since in the last 30 or 40 years or so, where they've gone to a point now, maybe not even that long, where now stallions are not breeding 40 mares a year and that's it. They're breeding 200. So, it's a little risky. I mean, I know if you're playing at that level and you're spending that kind of money, you have the money pretty much. And if you don't make it, you don't make it. But it's going to squeeze a little bit, start squeezing, I think, in the next few years. And it might bring some of these prices down.
According to the Jockey Club stud book, look, the number of foals each year has been dropping. It's down a solid 40% over, say, 20 years ago. So that's going to limit the number of mares, right? I mean, if there are less foals bred, figure half of them are going to be fillies, half of them are going to be colts, roughly, within the percentages. And so there's just less brood mares, as you mentioned, moving forward. So it's kind of a cyclical event. Should we care as industry people? Yes. Should we care as horse players? Not really. What a horse sells for at sale really doesn't do a whole lot for me. It's more about a horse maybe with a bad pedigree who sells for a lot. That is, as a handicapping angle, you look at that, you're usually intrigued by that, right? That the horse must have been a spectacular looker or worked really good in a 2-year-old in training sale, those kind of handicapping angles. But when you talk Keeneland, to me, I'm more geeked up for the Keeneland race meet than the sales, and we got about 2 weeks to go for that, and I will be juiced for the Keeneland racing season when that gets underway. Let's go back to the big board in our second topic this week on It's Official. We go from the sales ring to Woodbine, where it was happy hour for Charlie Appleby in the Woodbine Mile. He had the big favored Master of Seas, and really there wasn't any anxious moments in this one. He was confident late.
As they come to the home stretch in the Rico Woodbine Mile, and here coming is War Bomber to join My Sea Cottage, and Lucky Score on the outside. Master of the Seas trying to gather them in. William Buick down the outside, and Shell Spider. Now I Chocolat is rallying. Master of the Seas goes up. Shell Spider deeper on the track. It is Master of the Seas exploding clear, and Master of the Seas racing away with the Rico Woodbine Mile. A most impressive display. It's Master of the Seas, a dominant win. Scores by almost 4 lengths to Shell Spite. Lucky Score third. 5 away War Bomber, then I Chocolat. And at long last, My Sea Cottage. They ran 1:33.79.
Good since coming back from the layoff and the needed break from an injury. So Master of the Seas now, Jeff, one of the favorites towards the Breeders' Cup Mile, you would have to think. And watching that replay, I liked his stride. He had that daisy cutter action, like they say, like you stay on top of the ground and you're really cutting the grass on top. that should play well at Santa Anita. He gets over the top of the ground pretty well.
And that's one of the reasons why Charlie brings him over here. He knows which ones want the firm ground, which ones need heavy or soft. And Master of the Seas getting over that ground so impressively, flying home mile and 33 3, which is actually very good. When you can break down the race from the first half to the second half.
Yeah.
First half 47-1, and the second half 46 and 2. So I mean, when you go in the second half faster than the first by that much, you're really flying. He's going to go back to Europe to train, but the word is now that even though he is going to be housed over at Charlie's yard overseas, he will, all things being equal and everything being healthy, will come back for the Breeders' Cup Mile. And I don't know who among the other milers are going to show up for a race like this.
Right.
There's some biggies that are talking about coming over, but man, I mean, the local contingent once again looks like they are in deep, deep water.
Yeah, I mean, in the U.S., you've seen Casa Creed do well this year at Saratoga, but Casa Creed kind of not even a patented miler. And then the other top one in the U.S. might be in Italian, the Phillies. So, yeah, there's not a standout. There's not a Wise Dan. There's not a World Approval, that kind of turf horse for the Americans to kind of hang their hat on this year. So, it would look like Master of the Seas is a probable favorite unless somebody else big from Europe is going to come over for the Breeders' Cup Mile. He looked awfully good. We said it was happy hour for Appleby, not only at Woodbine, but he also had the big winner in Belmont, where Eternal Hope got up in the Jockey Club Invitational Oaks, and the 3-year-old filly looked good in a grinding performance, but she got it done fairly impressively. Here's Eternal Hope.
Stephanie Strom. Quarrel is getting closer in second. Then Highland Grace as they head for home. It's Quarrel on the outside who has now taken over the lead. Highland Grace is moving into second. Then Spearling Bayog. Eternal Hope is out in the middle of the course. Eternal Hope is kicking in late here. And darting to the inside is Nisi Marie. Nisi Marie. Eternal Hope on the outside. Spearling Bayog is third. Eternal Hope got the job done.
In our handicapping podcast on Friday that it gives Jamie Spencer another chance to be cursed out by American players. He did everything he could in that race. He was kind of all over and, never got her into a comfortable stride in the stretch. And she just got there anyway on her own volition. If she ever put her head down and ran like we saw with Master of the Seas at Woodbine, where he was leveled off, as they say, and reaching out nicely, she'd have probably won this race quite a bit easier. Maybe she wasn't handling the ground so well, but this is a filly who was expected to deliver this kind of performance against a subpar group of 3-year-old fillies in the U.S. this year on the turf. Your thoughts on her, and can she come back and take on Elders, or is this one that we want to look at just against the fillies and the 3-year-old ranks?
I think she was here to win a race like this. I don't think Charlie had any illusions about prepping her for the Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf. I mean, you've got a 3-year-old filly like this that's now won 3 out of 6. I mean, she's obviously a decent filly. She's was a listed stakes winner, third in a Group 2 at Deauville last time out. This is the kind of race that Charlie says, okay, I think we can win this kind of race. Let's not overshoot our sights here. And she came over here. It was, I thought, given a lot to do, quite frankly, from the fourth long pole of the wire. Give her credit for winning. But again, the ability to recognize what you have, as Charlie Appleby so accurately does, and then find spots for them where they can win without overmatching them. I mean, that's a true skill. I mean, we look at the PPs, we're trying to figure out whether she fits or not, and sometimes it's not that difficult, like with Master of the Seas, But here's a filly who won a couple races. That's it. And in handicapping this race, I recognize what the local contingent is, what the quality is like. Right. And Charlie says, I got a filly that I know can beat that field. So he ships her over, gets the graded stakes win and the money and all that. He's done what he's supposed to do. I don't know why more trainers don't do it. I mean, it's not that hard, really, I don't think. But Eternal Hope, Irish bred filly, I mean, she'll make a living in lesser races, but she will make a living because she will always be properly spotted.
And it doesn't get much easier for a ship than to come from England to Aqueduct, right? I mean, that was a really good, you come off the plane there at JFK and you're right across the street pretty much. Same story at Keeneland, where you can fly right into Lexington and go across the street to Keeneland. And the Queen Elizabeth II Challenge Cup, a big grade 1 left for 3-year-old fillies on the calendar. That seems to me like a better spot if they're going to come back to the U.S. With this filly Eternal Hope than to try the older fillies and mares on the Breeders' Cup scene in the filly and mare turf. So maybe we'll see her back in the U.S. But again, you came here, you got the grade 1 win, so you kind of got mission accomplished. Is there anything else to gain by coming and winning at Keeneland in the QE2? We'll see what she's got left in the tank for this year. But that to me would seem like a better spot than to try the Breeders' Cup in the Elders.
No question.
Let's go to our third topic on the board this week. And this filly absolutely belongs in the Breeders' Cup discussion. In the Juvenile Fillies division, VV's Dream, last time out at Churchill over the weekend in the Pocahontas Stakes, stamped herself as one to watch in the Juvenile Fillies on dirt. Let's go to the replay of that one now with Travis Stone, the call at Churchill Downs of the Pocahontas.
We're at the quarter pole. Hot beach off the turn. You almost had me. VV's Dream is cut loose, and here she comes. And there she goes, right on by to the front. VV's Dream, just like that. 5-length lead furlong to go. Hot Beach gives way with You Almost Had Me. Farther back, it's Corb. They're coming down to the finish, and from off the pace, VV's Dream does it easily. Sailing home to win it by 6 lengths. You Almost Had Me grab second. Hot Beach was third, and Corb was fourth.
We mentioned in our handicapping podcast first call on Friday about Kenny McPeak's success in this race over the years. He's had fillies ready to go for the Pocahontas, and a lot of those come back to go in the Alcibiades and get that 2-turn experience. The Pocahontas, the 1-turn mile there at Churchill. So she successfully stretched out from the sprints at Saratoga to the mile around 1 turn. I would have to think she gets a call next in the Alcibiades opening weekend at Keeneland back on 3-4 weeks, and I think she'd be pretty tough in there.
She's a good filly. I was actually shocked when she couldn't get by Brightwork, and then now I'm not so shocked anymore because Brightwork is terrific. But VV's Dream has now got that 2-turn, a 1-turn race under her belt, and she has that great style because in all 3 of her races, and none of her 3-year-old races so far are 2-year-old races, the 3 of them, she's gone to the front. She likes to settle and make a run, and that's a pretty good attribute to have if you're a 2-year-old filly. So many of them are just fast and they outrun you. You never know how far they want to go. But even though this filly is a daughter of Matoli and therefore should be a sprinter, she looks like a route horse all over the place. And now Kenny has to figure out how much, if any, does he want to do with her before the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. But along with Brightwork and Tamara, Tamara, she's the one of the 3 that are head and shoulders right now above the others in this division. Now that could change overnight, really, but right now those 3 are good, really good, and this filly is really good too. In fact, the buyer number of 87 puts her right there with the tops among the others in the division as well.
Juvenile Fillies almost seems like it's got a little more top-end strength in the juvenile division right now, and we'll find out in the final round of preps. Of course, for these Juvenile Fillies, you have the Frazette in New York. You've got the Alcibiades at Keeneland. Then you've got the Chandelier out at Santa Anita to give us our final flux of horses towards the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Probably 2 or 3 out of each one of those races will be amongst the dozen or so in the starting gate when we get to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Talking Breeders' Cup here on It's Official. Let's go to our Breeders' Cup tracker, our consistent 4th topic here. Woodbine and Churchill Downs, we've already seen some races from both those venues. They are in the spotlight of our Breeders' Cup tracker as well. Jeff said in the beginning portion of the show that he was impressed by some 2-year-olds at Woodbine. We're going to get a chance to see a couple Woodbine Stakes races with Breeders' Cup win and year-end implications. The Natalma Stakes for the Fillies and the Juvenile Fillies Turf Division. Then the Juvenile Turf Division had the Summer Stakes. Let's take a look first at the Juvenile Fillies aspirants. She Feels Pretty with the upset win in the Natalma Stakes.
She Feels Pretty running on with Ready to Jam. 1.5 lengths behind them came on the inside Dazzling Star running on from She's Fire. And as they come down the lane, Brock Nadini and Diamatrona behind them, but out in front, Golden Canary simply in front, challenging Azara coming with now flying She Feels Pretty. She Feels Pretty on the outside's gone right on by, takes over from Simply in front, and She Feels Pretty in the lead, Simply in front in second. And then came Azara, Golden Canary, but She Feels Pretty careering away in the Johnny Walker Natalma Stakes. She Feels more than pretty Pretty. She feels fantastic, and she wins by 3.5 lengths to simply in front, Dazzling Star. Zara Golden Canary and out wide a Dancing Duchess in the time of 1:35.34.
It's the way you like to see one gallop out after an impressive victory. Really leveled off nice and was reaching out well. Your thoughts on She Feels Pretty, a nice 2-year-old filly on the grass?
I think she's going to be very formidable in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies turf. I know the Euros are going to bring something that can run. Obviously, right. They always do. But this is a cut above, I think, the normal U.S.-based 2-year-old filly for this division. Mm-hmm. She won her debut sprinting at Ellis Park. She was 6-1. She rallied from way back to do that. It was nice. I mean, she won like a nice filly. Then she goes back and steps up in class, as so many of these do. They take that impressive maiden win and they put it to use in the Smile race. And some of them were expected to step up. I picked a filly that I thought was pretty good, Brock Nardini. She had done it at Saratoga. She wound up last, so she did not. I mean, she had a tough trip, but she still didn't fire. But this one went the other division, the right division. Took that Ellis Park sprint, built on it, and draws away with power here. A daughter of a Breeders' Cup mile winner in Cara Conti, and out of a mare by More Than Ready. What else is she supposed to do, right? Run on the grass. And the 85 buyer number, very, very strong. I think she is really, really a good filly for Cherie DeVoe. And I think she's going to see her perhaps run one more time. But if not, maybe straight into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. I mean, she made such a forward move between her maiden and second start. I'm not sure how much more she needs.
Somebody may correct me in the comments section here following along on YouTube, but I think Cara Conti's Breeders' Cup Mile win was at Santa Anita, if memory serves me. So that's good vibes, right? I mean, you wonder on pedigree, is she going to be able to translate the form to the top of the ground at Santa Anita? Firm sire did it, so that doesn't hurt when you're trying to project ahead with some of these horses doing things they've never done before, like traveling out to Santa Anita performing there.
Jerry, I want to jump in real quick because I wanted to point something out that kind of ties in with our first topic. This is a filly by Cara Conti, and Cara Conti stands for $10,000. Okay, right? Solid. You get value for $10,000. You're not looking for a Kentucky Derby winner, but you're looking for a filly or a colt. This filly at auction at Keeneland brought $240,000. Yeah. So when you get a filly or a colt or any yearling that brings so much more than the sire's stud fee, it has to be a very, very good individual horse. Good looking, correct, good size, strong. And to me, that's, as a handicapper, that's where I use the price. I don't really care what it brings, but when you have a foal that brings much more than it's supposed to, that tells me that we're talking about not only a talented horse, but a good-looking, athletic, promising individual. That feeds into the evaluation of the process when you're looking to see whether a horse like She Feels Pretty has a chance to step up to Grade 1 company.
Good handicapping tip there, and certainly she was all that and more with an impressive performance in the Natalma. Now, the sister and brother race on the card, on the Woodbine Mile undercard for the 2-year-old colts, is the Summer Stakes. And while we see Europeans tend to do really well in the Breeders' Cup division for the colts, the fillies division has been more domestic. So She Feels Pretty maybe more of a Breeders' Cup contender than what we see out of the Summer Stakes historically, because we're probably looking for Europeans when it comes to the juvenile turf. But do we have one in an upset winner here? Let's go back and look at Carson's Run, a rallying winner at Woodbine of the Summer Stakes.
Joel Rosario trying to go for broke now. My Boy Prince in the Summer Stakes from Western World. Here's Carson's Run. What a slingshot run down the outside by Dylan Davis. Carson's Run storming out wide. They're wide apart. Carson's Run and My Boy Prince flat up against the inside, and they are well clear. Go with Gusto running on, but down extremely wide on the track. Carson's Run and powering on for a fantastic win. Dylan Davis and Carson's Run by about 2 or 3 lengths.
Jeff, the runner-up in there was the big favorite off a dominating win, and this is one where horses get very far apart from each other on the track, and sometimes you don't get that lock-up and duel that you expect to see because they just don't see each other. They're too far apart. I remember Touch Gold, Silver Charm, right? Chris McCarron said that's why they were able to catch Silver Charm in the 97 Belmont, is they were so far apart from each other. He didn't see us coming, that kind of thing like that, or he would have dug in. I think we'd have had a little better stretch duel if they would have been a little bit closer on the track, because the runner-up didn't seem to give way, but the winner did accelerate on, and it was a nice performance by Carson's Run.
It was better than I was expecting, and I was kind of fooled here because I thought the trip that my boy Prince had gotten up until that point would have carried him through, and he did come home pretty quick, the leader, which is why I'm going to give credit to Carson's Run, because not only did he lose a tremendous amount of ground, but he didn't really, I don't know if he had a target to go after. I don't know if you could see him, but he stayed on well. And now with 3 starts, he's got 2 wins and a second, the second being a runner-up effort in the With Anticipation, a 2-turn race at Saratoga. So he's a coming horse. He's by Cupid, and here's another situation. Cupid stands for $5,000. I mean, he's a good $5,000 stallion. You buy a horse by Cupid, you're looking for a horse in maybe the smaller circuits to do well. This horse, this colt brought $170,000 in the 2-year-old sale, which you're not usually going to spend that kind of money for a Cupid unless there's something more than meets the eye. So again, that's how you use the prices. Try to figure out what the norm, the average is, and if they bring more than that, then maybe you've got a colt or a filly that is better than given the pedigree would suggest. But Carson's Run ran well here, stayed on well, a long extended run for Christophe Clement. Logically, he would be a Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf candidate. I don't know if he's a great horse or anything like that. It all depends on what the Euros bring over, as it was the case last year when they brought over the winner, and they brought over a colt that was probably a little bit better than you're normally going to see.
Still around the preps in New York and Kentucky for the 2-year-olds on turf, and of course in Southern California as well. We don't expect either of these Woodbine horses to come out early in prep in Southern California, so you'd expect them either at Keeneland or at Belmont next. Of course, Keeneland's got the good series with the Bourbon and the Jessamine races that have done pretty well, and then you've got the Miss Grillo up in New York. It's been one of the best preps of all in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf Division, so maybe we'll see She Feels Pretty in that one, or they could go down and run in the Jessamine at Keeneland. So a lot of different options for those two. Cherie DeVoe and, as you mentioned, Christophe Clement, the trainers, support both New York and Kentucky racing. So options there for those two. And maybe they just lay up and wait for the Breeders' Cup. That's also an option at this point in the schedule. One more on our Breeders' Cup tracker. The Breeders' Cup Distaff division has been a strong one this year. We've seen the Clariers and Secret Oath and those types just kind of locking up since the beginning of the year in the Apple Blossom at Oaklawn. Search Results has been part of that mix. She got off the path a little bit this past weekend and ran in the Locust Grove. Maybe you call it a confidence builder to get a horse like this back on her game. If that was the goal, she could be primed towards a uptick in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. She was good this past weekend.
Hidden Connection and Search Results, 1-2 off the turn. Search Results cut the corner and reclaims the lead and kicks away by 2. Search Results with 1 furlong to go. Hidden Connection fully extended back in second. Misty Vale third. Pauline's Pearl fourth. First is Search Results with 100 yards to go, and she returns to winning ways to score by 3 lengths in the end. Hidden Connection was second. Misty Vale was third, and Pauline's Pearl was fourth.
See, Jeff, if you're trying to get a horse back on their game, it was decent competition. You heard Pauline's Pearl, some other names in her wake. Not the kind that are going to be the top 3 wagering choices in the Breeders' Cup Distaff, but this could get her back and maybe prime towards the Spinster at Keeneland if they want to go that route and see what they've got there before they would have to make a decision on the Breeders' Cup. But I was fairly impressed by Search Results here. This is what I wanted to see.
Absolutely. And this is a filly that our mare now, 5 years of age. She had not won a race since the Ruffian at New York back in May of 2022. And since then, she has been running against the very best and running well, hitting the board, but not winning. And I think what Chad Brown figured out is, look, enough of this. All right. This mare deserves to win a race. Let's lower our sights, get a confidence building win. Put her in a race where she actually can win. And if she doesn't win a race like this, then maybe she's done enough. But let's give her a chance at least to run against horses and mares that she has a chance to be able to beat. So he drops her into this grade 3, the Locust Grove, finds a race with very little speed in it, 1/2 and 48. Search Results has never to my knowledge, ever gone to the front or consistently so, able to make the lead here because nobody else went. And boy, you talk about a happy mare. I mean, you put her in a race where she can win and she doesn't have to run hard the first part. She's going to beat you. And this tells me that as long as Chad runs search results in races in which the pace looks like it should be comfortable and that there are no monsters in there, this is what she's bred to do. This is what she's supposed to do. And she did it. I did my hat to her. Nice win for search results. And, she's earned well over almost now approaching $2 million. And what a nice mare she's been over the years. Just don't ask her to be somebody maybe that she's just not.
If they don't want to go the Breeders' Cup route, you still have the Fall City at Churchill at the Thanksgiving weekend, which is a really good race with a good purse. And so if they want to keep that same mojo that they had here with the Locust Grove, she likes Churchill. We know that. She ran her eyeballs out in the Kentucky Oaks a couple of years ago. She ran really well Derby weekend when running third in a really tough race there. So she likes Churchill Downs. If they just want to wait for the Fall City, maybe they go Spinster Fall City, and that's the way they want to go in a fall campaign and not go towards the Breeders' Cup Distaff. It's a good Distaff division this year, but she's not far off the top ones, and her best effort puts her right in the mix. And there is only one Breeders' Cup Distaff. It's eluded her to this point, so maybe they'll give it another shot. I'm encouraged by what I saw in the Locust Grove. Let's go to our fifth and final topic this week on It's Official. You know, we like to finish up with a look ahead, and it's our Stars of Tomorrow segment. We're looking for 2-year-olds or horses early in their careers, maybe doing something in the maiden ranks, making a bit of a splash. We're going to take you back to Churchill Downs on September 15th, the 7th race. Keep your eyes to the inside, and I mean keep looking and keep looking and keep looking, because Parchment Party is going to finally get through.
Collins is right there in behind. Warp 9 with a big move on the far turn, needs to find a way through. Got stopped right at the 3/16. In the meantime, Django's coming down the center, and Parchment Party's got a shot too, and so too Allied Victory. Wide open for long to go. Django outside, Parchment Party inside. These two go along with it. Parchment Party coming up the rail. Parchment Party got it on the wire.
Jeff, a lot of times you see with young horses just brilliant performances, right? They show that they're just far superior developmentally and speed. You don't get to see the education a lot of times with young horses. This was a case where a horse obviously showed that he has a very good mind.
Boy, I tell you what, I would be over the moon if I were Pinocchio, because this is a colt that isn't bred to be a 2-year-old. He isn't bred to win first time out, and which is one of the reasons why Belmont ran him long first time out. He got no action. He was 16-1. I'm sure they just threw him into the race saying, look, he's not going to show speed. He's probably going to break slow. He's probably not going to be in the race. Let him on the last quarter and gallop out and see what you got, you know.
Yeah.
And this colt wins first time out. He does it drawn away by more than a length. He was 10 in front of everybody galloping out into the clubhouse turn and into the backstretch. And when you have a colt that's bred like this by constitution, and out of a mare named Life Well Lived, who already has produced a horse named American Patriot, who was a Grade 1 winner at Keeneland, well-humored, a very, very nice filly for sure. Another stakes placed horse named Mouk Tasser. And she herself, a full sister to Dubai World Cup winner, Well Armed. I mean, you're looking at a colt that's not even supposed to be out of bed at that 2 years of age. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And yet, you know, he does it in style. He comes through. He probably gets like 5 races worth of an education in doing it. And now you're okay. Now you're sometimes you prefer them not to win, because then you can run them back against maidens and get more experience. There's nowhere else for this colt to go than in the stakes right now. Whether or not he's mentally ready for it or not, that's where he has to go. And I don't know how good this colt Parchment Party is right now, but what can you imagine he could possibly be 7-8 months down the road?
He just has that fairgrounds feel to me. Mott supports the Louisiana Derby Series anyway. Those races have that long stretch at fairgrounds. He got the long stretch there at Churchill, 1,200 plus feet. He gets even longer at fairgrounds. They run longer races, right, all the way up to a mile and 3/16. The middle prep is a mile and an eighth there. I mean, you don't have to ever cut him back, right? He comes back at a mile and a 16th and a mile and an eighth and stretches out to a mile and 3/16. I mean, this just has the feel of a fairground Fairgrounds Louisiana Derby horse. If you can get early props on the Louisiana Derby, this is the kind of horse you want. I'm not saying he wins the Louisiana Derby at this point, but that's the kind of horse, right? And when you think 2-year-olds, right, and they run well first time out or they have high expectations, we're always just trying to figure out where would they fit on the Derby trail, right? I mean, maybe not necessarily a brilliantly fast track, maybe he's not a horse for the, Holy Bull and those races, or certainly he's not going to go west Vermont and go run in the Sham against Baffert at a mile in January, right? I mean, it just feels like fairgrounds, right? And you can even see a horse like this being held for the Remsen because it's a 1.125 miles. He can get the distance. You won't get the heavyweights in there and the fastest horses in the crop because they're going to go to the Breeders' Cup. I could see Remsen then fairgrounds for this horse. So just map out the next 4 races for him, and we'll see what we got in May.
Remsen makes sense because he's already now been 2 turns. Sometimes you get these flashy 2-year-olds and you want to stretch them out, but you don't want to throw them around 2 turns first, right off the bat. And the 7/8 might be too sharp. But this colt's already been a 1.116 miles. And the way he galloped out, he's probably fit to go 1.25 miles already. So I wouldn't necessarily think if they have long range goals of the Triple Crown, and why wouldn't they?
Right.
Forget the Breeders' Cup, okay? I mean, this is not the kind of colt that has to run in a race like that. Take him to the Remington, go to Fairgrounds. Your goal is the first Saturday in May, and whatever it takes, work back from there. You know what I'm saying? Backwards. What can I do to make sure? How much does he need? And because I got one thing about this colt, there ain't no distance limitations about him. I don't have to worry about that. I just have to worry about how quickly I want to throw him to the wolves and how much maturity he needs to get. And I might have something extraordinary next spring.
That's why we finish on this topic every week, because it's optimism, right? The old saying around the backstretch was no trainer with a good 2-year-old ever committed suicide, right? I mean, it was like you want to be around for the 3-year-old year, and you get excited with horses like this. So this game has a fun way of replenishing itself every year. There's an element to that just gives eternal optimism. So amongst all the difficult things we talk about from time to time on this show, when we get a prospect that we really like, that's what we kind of get excited about. And Parchment Party for Bill Mott, one to keep an eye on throughout the coming months for sure. Now, when we started the year, Jeff, in this show, I remember we put a graphic up. Trainer Brad Cox, as we hit our bonus topic this week, we've got a couple big derbies coming up this weekend in Pennsylvania and Oklahoma at Parks and Remington. We put up a graphic at the beginning of the year that Brad Cox had about 25 horses to go towards the Triple Crown, right? I mean, he had everything, and these horses were all highly credentialed. We got to the Triple Crown Series this year, and Cox got shut out. He didn't have anything, but his depth is still showing, because as we hit the final round of high-dollar 3-year-old derbies, with the $1 million race at Parks, the $400,000 Oklahoma Derby at Remington this weekend, it's Brad Cox who has the 2 favorites. Saudi Crown, a late bloomer, is going to be the favorite in the Pennsylvania Derby. He just comes off that narrow runner-up at Saratoga in the Jim Dandy behind Champion Forte. And then he'll have Hit Show, a horse who finished top 5 in both the Derby and the Belmont Stakes. Nobody thinks Hit Show's a top 5 sophomore, but he top 5 2 of the 2/3 of the Triple Crown. He'll definitely be the favorite and horse to beat in the Oklahoma Derby on Sunday. So the depth of Cox is going to show this weekend.
Sure. And what Brad needs to do, and is doing obviously, is trying to get the most out of his 3-year-olds while they're 3,
right?
Because these purses are not necessarily going to go away, but now you're running against older horses, a much tougher task. But you will, as a trainer and as an owner, you get a 3-year-old and everybody dreams about the Derby and the Triple Crown, the Travers. You have to run your horses in races they can win. It's okay to try them, but once it looks to me, it looks to you, looks to the trainer that maybe, okay, we've got to let this horse do what he can do while he can do it. Then you have to get realistic. And I think that's what Brad's doing now towards the tail end of the year. He's taking advantage of these big purses for 3-year-olds because they're going to evaporate in not too long from now. And he does a good job with that. No more illusions, just win the races you can win.
And when you talk about the 3-year-olds this year, we had the 1-2 finish by the 3-year-olds in the Pacific Classic, right? That was Arabian Night and Go Rocket Ride. Arcangelo out of the Travers looks like he is the favorite for the Breeders' Cup Classic. So this is a year where the 3-year-olds may not have you got Forte as well, who's going to vie for favoritism in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So this was a year that we wanted to see how it played out during the course of the year. And there are just no great older horses out there to push away the 3-year-olds and say, you don't belong, right? The 3-year-olds look like they belong in the Breeders' Cup Classic this year. So a stellar performance by Saudi Crown in the Pennsylvania Derby absolutely would put him in the mix, right? When last seen, he took Forte to a head decision at Saratoga. I don't think Hit Show gets the Breeders' Cup Classic, but somebody's going to tell you that he's a 1.25 mile horse, and he is, just not super fast at it. A big effort from him. Maybe you could see those 2 Brad Cox horses end up in the Breeders' Cup Classic out of these races this weekend. In most years, I would say that's a little bit of wishful thinking. This year, if you've got a 3-year-old who can run, who's going to scare you away amongst the older horses?
Nobody. I mean, last year we had Flightline. I mean, that was a foregone conclusion. No one's going to beat him. Why even try? Mm-hmm. But this year, it's not a question of, should I be afraid of them? No. I mean, those older horses should be afraid of the 3-year-olds because the older horses are just as ordinary as they can be, and it's just the way it worked out. I mean, sometimes you have great competitive crops and classes, and other times you don't. So I would say that not only should these 3-year-olds be considered if they go out and run numbers that are putting them into the fray, but these are going to be your older horses from next year too. I mean, they're going to be the 4-year-olds, and God help us, we need new blood in that division, Jeremy. So I hope they all kind of stay sound and do well towards the end of this year, and then we can pick them up next year.
And we got White Barrio as the top of the division. He was no factor really in the Triple Crown last year, but he was a Florida Derby winner, right? And he just wasn't up to the task in the Triple Crown. But at age 4, since the barn switch from Saffie to Rick Dutrow, has upped his game. And some horses do improve at age 4. Barn change could have had a lot to do with that too. We'll just see how it shakes out. But if White Barrio is the benchmark amongst the older horses, then the 3-year-olds have to say, come on, come on. Let's see what we can do and see how we match up against
Jeremy, would you have said that it was rather unlikely for him to rise to the top in the older handicap division, White Barrio, say around April or May of this year?
Yeah, and especially as he ran a decent race in the Met Mile, so that almost is he better even going a little bit shorter in a race that calls upon a little brilliance? Yeah, so to think he's back to a 1.25 mile horse for the Derby, and look, we've said this, we were saying this for Cody's Wish all year. If you're going to get a distance and not be a true distance horse, the Whitney is the race on the calendar to do it in the Classic division, right? The track's always fast at Saratoga that day, 1 1/8, short run to the first turn. It plays this, horses have got some speed and brilliance to them. So just winning the Whitney does not make you a Breeders' Cup Classic 1.25 mile horse. With the long run from the top of the stretch to Santa Anita, a big 2-turn race, it's a completely different kind of running of a race than what we see the 1 1/8 at Saratoga for the Whitney. So there's still a lot of questions on whether or not White Barrio is a 1.25 mile horse. And again, that offers intrigue and hope to all those 3-year-olds in there. But I'll tell you right now, I mean, Arcangelo and Forte are head and shoulders to me the top 2 horses right now that you want to talk about for the Breeders' Cup Classic. And the way he ran last time, Arcangelo is lengths better than Forte right now. This could be one of those situations where Arcangelo is on his way to a Horse of the Year performance and a Horse of the Year trophy.
That's where I stand right now. It could change, but right now he is by far the leader of the pack.
You were on that one early, too. I mean, before the Belmont Stakes, you were on Arcangelo. So I will give you credit there because I was not buying Arcangelo, even up to in the Travers. It's not I was against him in the Travers or anything like that, but I wasn't sold. But now the for sale sign has the sold marker on top there.
You're sold.
In the front yard. Yeah, in the front yard, the sold sign is hanging. Arcangelo is pretty darn good. We will review this weekend's racing. Do we have a couple horses out of those derbies in Oklahoma and Pennsylvania that move towards the Breeders' Cup Classic? Well, we'll review it next week on Tuesday on It's Official. Between now and then, we will have our handicapping podcast on Friday. Be sure to check that out on First Call. If you're listening on our podcast channels, we certainly appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and share this video with others as we help grow our audience here on It's Official. On behalf of my partner, Jeff Siegel, and everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Have a great week. We'll talk to you Friday.